Gospel according to Luke. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his field to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him?' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. Some years ago, when I resided in Indiana, I attended a number of retreats at John 23rd Center, a Catholic retreat center in Hartford City, Indiana, that has since closed. But one of the art pieces on the wall was a print of Rembrandt's depicting this younger son in our gospel being welcomed home by the Father. And what was unusual about this picture was the broken glass and hole in the middle of the print. And a note of explanation was posted beside it. For this print had been part of an exhibition at a conference. It went missing overnight and was found in its damaged condition in a back hallway. Apparently, someone on the work staff had rammed a chair leg right through it. And I wonder what pain this picture prompted in them. What was their story? Had they been like that younger son, yet had never received a welcome home? Or were they more like the resentful older brother? We'll never know. But it reveals that this story, and even just a depiction of it, has the power to stir up some very strong emotions. There are a lot of outright scandalous details in this story. And when we treat it as a nice homecoming story with a dose of sibling rivalry thrown in just to spice up the plot, we're apt to overlook its shock value. Which character do you think is the most shocking and scandalous one? Which brother do you think is the most shameful? A likely candidate is that younger son. By asking for his share of the inheritance while the old man is still kicking and breathing was the equivalent of saying, "I just wish you were dead." As 21st century Americans, we're insulated from the shock value of that request, but for the Jewish listeners immersed in the honor-shame culture of the Middle East, it was shocking that the father consented to give him his share. And this younger son adds to his candidacy for being the most scandalous by just cashing out his inheritance and heading off on an adventure to find all the excitement that money can buy. He leaves his boring home behind. But once his money is all gone, the economy tanks and he hits rock bottom. He ends up working for a pig farmer, envying what the pigs are eating. Scandalous, utterly disgraceful. Remember that for Jews, pigs are unclean. So he's probably working for a Gentile. His whole state of affairs qualifies him to be a recipient of something called Getsatza, should he show up in his village again. The scribes and Pharisees who were listening to Jesus tell this story may have even been anticipating the Getsatza prescribed by the Talmud to punish any Jewish boy who would lose the family inheritance to Gentiles. The villagers in a Getsatza would fill a ceramic jar with burnt nuts and corn and then break it in front of the offender, pronouncing his name out loud and proclaiming him cut off from his people. The offense of this younger son was such that he deserved to be shunned by the whole community. This younger son's life is quite scandalous. Yet he did eventually remember who he was and came to his senses. He returns home with a prepared confessional speech, willing to become one of his father's hired hands. Yet, by wasting away his inheritance and then working for a Gentile, really puts him in the running for being the most scandalous character in the story. Does he get your vote? The older brother is another candidate. He's so in tune with the shame that his younger brother has brought on the family that he can't see how he adds to the shame with his refusal to join the party. He clings to his moral rightness. It would be one thing maybe if the father took his brother back as a hired hand and made him earn his way back into the family. But to welcome him back and throw a party? Outrageous. It seems like his father is just condoning this reprehensible behavior. Yet he too dishonors his father by his refusal. He won't even claim him as a brother. He refers to him in that conversation with his father as this son of yours. He's so stuck in his quest for fairness and being right, he can't join in his father's celebration. And the party can be seen as an Easter celebration. The father reminds his older son that his brother was lost and is now found. He was dead and is now alive. And the Easter connection is even more evident in the original language. It gets lost somewhat in our translation. For when the younger son was contemplating his return home, he says to himself, "I will rise up," which is just translated, "he'll get up." Yet it's the same word used for Jesus rising from the dead. And it's used again 2 verses later, translated there, "so he set off." Now, don't you think that it's quite scandalous for this older brother to refuse to join in an Easter celebration? The story is open-ended, with us not knowing if the father's pleading would sway that older son. But as it's left with him just there, we know how hard it is to let go of resentments, especially when we hold the higher ground, knowing what's right and fair. Yeah, this older brother is scandalous, all right. We don't know if he ever joined the party, but since we assume he didn't, does he get your vote to be the most scandalous, most shocking character? Neither one get my vote. Perhaps you figured out by now who does get my vote. The most shocking, scandalous character in the story isn't either one of the brothers. It's the father. He embodies the scandal of love. And it brings one shock after another as he behaves very differently from what's expected of a dignified patriarch in the Middle East, both then and now. He realizes that his younger son can't be restrained. Love can't be forced. So when he seeks for a way to be free, the old man complies, even if he'll become the laughingstock of the whole village. And when the boy returns, he runs out to greet him. We may not think anything of that, but no self-respecting patriarch would be seen running. Nonetheless, this father is on a mission, and there's no time to waste. He must be reconciled to this son before the villagers get together to conduct that Getsatsa. He doesn't even seem to pay attention to the prepared confession and admission that he's no longer fit to be his son. The robe, the ring, the big party with prime rib for all the guests are his signal to others that this son has been restored in relationship to him. Something similar like this happens to us all in baptism. Through water and the word, we're given a new identity as God's beloved sons and daughters. And even a sojourn away into a distant country does not change that reality. God's ever ready to reclaim sons and daughters and throws an Easter party for any and all who are lost and then found, for those who were dead and restored to life. And this scandalous father isn't through shocking his guest. When it's reported to him that his older son is staging a boycott protest, any honorable patriarch would just let him stew and certainly not leave his guests to go to him. But as we've already discovered, this isn't your ordinary patriarch. It's clear to see that the scandal of this father's love extends to both his sons. His pleading shows that he values restored and right relationships over being right or even doing what seems fair. So who does this father represent in this story? The father has no standards and thus reveals maybe that holy standards are quite different. Many believe that Jesus intends the Father to give us a glimpse into the nature of God. And that may be so. But I invite you today to consider another possibility. What if? What if we are supposed to emulate the Father? This Father has room in his household for both of his sons. Do we? As Barbara Brown Taylor says, by the end of the story, his father is worn out with these warring, wasteful children of his, of how little it means to them to belong to one another, of how much more interested they are in being fulfilled and fed, or blameless and right, than they are in being reconciled to each other. As if securing their own identities were more important to them than living in peace with him and one another. It's all a matter of priorities. And for this father, reunion is what matters. Reunion finds the lost and brings them home. Reunion brings the dead back to life. Can you imagine a congregation as scandalous as the father in this story? Could this be our call? To not only be forgiven, but to be forgiving? To not only receive compassion, but to show compassion? To not only be welcomed home, but to be a safe place of welcome for all? Can we be a household of faith that, like the Father, throws an Easter party to celebrate all who are lost and found? Perhaps on April 19th, following our Easter Vigil worship, we can find out. I'm proposing in my April newsletter article, it hadn't come out yet, but you can read the details there, that we make a concerted effort to invite our overnight guests to come up from the basement and join us for an Easter party. I have no idea how this might go. But we will have a week to make invites and assure them that they are most welcome. One last thing to keep in mind. Jesus tells this story on his way to Jerusalem. By our own dying and rising, we stop wasting our lives in frivolous pursuits. We let go of our resentments and sense of being better than others. In dying and rising, we begin to live out the scandal of God's love and grace. Jesus' story is open-ended, so I leave it up to you to imagine how many sons joined in that Easter party. I also invite you to ponder how the outrageous scandal of God's unconditional love and grace matters to you. How might it best flow through you as we join in God's work of reconciling our broken and hurting world? And don't forget, each reconciliation begets a party. Amen.